some of these kids is like waiting.
Watch the clock.
Watch, yep.
Never
Possible
fall.
meals,
It's
right?
like 5 o'clock, I feel like it's like 10.
Ding
you know,
dong.
Just tired, you know.
It's not never bombs.
I said I watched the clock.
Especially when it doesn't have a second hand.
Where did I get that pen? I didn't get that from you, did I?
No, but it's a nice one.
Meeting to order. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Cody, roll call, please.
Supervisor Gunning.
Here.
Treasurer Rice.
Here.
Trustee Hauk.
Here.
Trustee Micus.
Here.
Trustee Lannon.
Here.
Trustee Worley.
Here.
Clerk Cody here.
All right. That brings us to item 4, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have any adjustments on the agenda? Do we like to approve it as is?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
The motion and support, further discussion? Seeing none, we bring this to vote. Approval of the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda approved. And we bring ourselves to item 6, which is public hearings. The first one is going to be public hearing for ordinance 2018-06. Mark, would you like to lead us into that?
Thanks. I'll just briefly provide some background, and you can open the public hearing. The current ordinance requires Board of Trustee approval for land divisions. This is not a requirement in the State Land Division Act. This amendment is only amending the local ordinance as it relates to land divisions by removing Board of Trustee approval. All the other requirements of the land division itself remain in place. All the appeals rights that the applicant has remain in place. The review would be done, as it currently is now, by the local assessor, planner, and township clerk. We would continue to update and advise the board during via the monthly written report, and we feel that this would reduce the time duration between the application and the approval, and therefore better serving the citizens and yourselves as well, I think. At the last meeting, the Board of Trustees voted to hold a public hearing tonight. That was posted. And so with that background, you could open the public hearing.
All right, with that, we open the public hearing at 7:02. Anyone would like to come forward on this item? Hello, sir.
Hello.
We have a public hearing right now on, do you know if you were here to speak on one of the public hearing items?
Mostly just to listen.
Okay. All right, seeing no one in the first public hearing, we close the public hearing at 7:03. And we bring ourselves to our second public hearing, and this is for ordinance 2018-08.
This is an amendment to the zoning map, also ordinance amendment. There's an application on file to rezone the northern portion of a parcel of property at 4080 South Whiteville Road to R2A, which is 1 and 2 family low density residential, from agricultural. The southern portion of the parcel would remain ag. The current use of the parcel is residential. And if this rezoning goes through, we could expect a parcel split application would be forthcoming. Planning Commission met on October 16th to consider this, and they voted to make a positive recommendation of the Board of Trustees that you approve this request. And at the last meeting, again, the Board of Trustees voted to hold a public hearing tonight on this matter.
All right. With that introduction, we'll open the public hearing at 7:04. All right. Seeing none, we close the public hearing and move on to our next item. And this is going to be public comment, and this is going to be restricted to 3 minutes regarding items on this agenda. And this will be a comment section only with no discourse between board and those with public comment. Seeing no one with public comment, we close public comment. We move on to reports and board comments. Item A is a current list of boards and commissions, appointments as needed. We do have some upcoming vacancies, unless we have received any other applications recently. I think we just have Mr. Bacon's for the EDA.
For the EDA, and he has expressed interest in the Planning Commission as well. I think there's some other applications on file. We'll get those to the board so you can begin your consideration of those.
I think most of them are after the first of the year for the most part, if I remember correctly. I think Mr. Bacon's the only one that ends in this fiscal year.
What
The-
about ZBA Paul Gross?
So Paul Gross, yeah,
Right.
we have that.
His position opens up in January of 19. There are 3 board of review positions open on 12/31 of 18. We hope to have those applications to you on the at the 19th meeting for consideration. And there's a ZBA opening on 12/31/18 as well.
We have 2 alternates, so
Right.
we're covered from the standpoint of having
We'll
that
be able to
seat
conduct
filled.
business.
Yeah, exactly. All right, any further comments on item A? All right, let's move on to item B. And this is the triennial lead and copper report.
This report is in your packet just for informational purposes only. I believe with this new board having been elected 2 years ago, this is the first time we've had the triannual lead and copper testing routine since this board's been seated. The EDA, EPA require this testing to be done once every 3 years. The township samples 30 private homes. There's a fairly rigorous routine that needs to be followed as part of these protocols. The results show that the system, the township's water system, is below any actionable levels. That does not mean that individual testing sites might be different than the system-wide. So I will point that out, but the test results came back very positive. There's a 2 or 3 page report along with the detail in your packet if you're interested in that kind of thing. I think there was some question brought up about lead and copper testing a couple months ago, and I'd indicated that once the results came back from the DEQ, there'd be a report in your packet.
And this report's available to the public also?
It is.
Contacted the office or?
It gets reported in the annual water quality report, and there is information in there for who to contact if there's other questions.
All right. Any questions for Mark at all on the?
Yeah, Mark, there were 2 of the 30 sites that were evaluated. 2 had slight elevations in the lead level. What's the follow-up that would be scheduled for those 2 sites, again, to ensure that, this isn't anything that's problematic?
We made contact with the individual property owners and let them know some of the things they could do to look further into it if they'd like. We don't have any technical legal responsibility at this point. We've met all our legal obligations, but we did make contact, face-to-face contact with the owners, let them know the results, and let them know some of the things they could possibly do on their end inside their four walls if they were further concerned.
Okay.
Questions? Good. All right. That moves us to item C. This is the Board of Trustees update, the monthly activity report. I don't think we really need to hash over this at all. We probably have all read it, right? Looked at it. Any
It was not in your
discussion?
packet. I need to provide that to you under separate cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals updates.
Good evening, Board.
Hello. Hello.
This month, it's been a bit of a slow month. The ZBA Zoning Board of Appeals meeting was actually canceled. There were no items on the agenda for action. Our November meeting, we had 2 items that were withdrawn shortly before the meeting took place, and so the only item that we approved at our past November Planning Commission meeting was the annual zoning report, which you'll find in the consent agenda in tonight's packet. Upcoming, we do have a scheduled special Planning Commission meeting, December 13th, Thursday, 6:30 p.m. That is for the diagnostic review of our zoning ordinance and working with our consultant McKenna. And so they will be here with us that night to go over the diagnostic review that they conducted on our zoning ordinance. That's all I have for you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, let's move on to, it's not on the agenda, but we do it every time, is our update on meetings that we've been to with updates. Tim, you want to start?
Yeah, I attended the most recent Isabella County Board of Commissioners meeting, which was November 20th. And it was really a quite short meeting. There was some discussion and a motion that was approved in utilizing a telecommunications consulting firm to help the county out as they move forward with their telecommunications and data type information operations. And that was in an amount of $13,653. Also, they didn't get into detail, but they accepted and placed on record their 4th quarter financial management services report, which Treasurer Steve Pickens offered to them during their afternoon work session. And that pretty much was a snapshot of where the county stands at that point in time last week with their financials. And as you recall, the county's in a situation that they feel pretty good about in comparison and looking back at some other years of where they were fiscally, to the point where they were comfortable, as I reported in other meetings, that they were having some increased salaries granted for employees this year, and so they're feeling pretty good about their financials as far as this year, fiscal year 2018. And that's what went on.
Very good. Thanks, Tim.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions for Tim at all? All right, Phil?
Hi, Ben. I attended the Sidewalk and Pathways Prioritization Committee meeting last night, and the committee's going to be sending to this board some communications on some of our most recent actions. For example, in our previous meeting in October, on October 30th, we discussed a recommendation to this board to basically instruct the manager to resume the township landowner sidewalk easement program negotiations. That's specifically addressing the Bluegrass Road sidewalk corridor, the Bluegrass Road area. So you'll be getting some formal communication about that in the coming weeks. And also, yesterday at the meeting, we discussed a letter of support to encourage the West DDA to continue their efforts to install sidewalks here along Lincoln. You know, you've seen it in our proposed budget for 2019. So, in summary, what the sidewalk committee did was started looking at prioritization based on the immediate future, which is next year's budget and dollars that are in the budget, either in the general fund budget or other funds such as the DDA funds that are earmarked towards sidewalks. So that's my report on the progress we're making in that committee.
Very good, very good. That's exciting on the easement program. Yeah.
Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
It could develop some more sidewalks
Yeah,
out there.
that's going to be very welcome to the community if we can get some of that taken care of.
Right, and you know, too, as we go through that, the upcoming budget year and developing the implementation of some of the sidewalks, for example, money in the general fund that we have for sidewalks, and if there's this particular stretch on Lincoln Road comes in at a different budget number than we expected, and we have some additional money, then we could look at more specific projects. Like, for example, one idea that came up at the meeting last night was that corner some of us have discussed in recent meetings, the corner of Bluegrass and Mission, where there's obviously a need for some sidewalks there when there's already the what do you call it, the ramp from the curb up to a point, but no additional sidewalks. So it is exciting, Ben, some possibilities that exist in the coming year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fabulous. Great news. Nice work on that committee.
Oh, all the members are doing great work.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. I'll pass it. Oh, and I wanted to pass this along too, that our next meeting is January 8th, at 6:30 in this room.
So you're inviting us.
It's an open door,
Yeah.
and I'm just reminding you. And
Yeah.
what I'm saying specifically is some board, I should say some committee members express their interest in this board knowing about our schedule, so that should you have any questions,
Yeah.
comments, or input, please come and share it with us.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm writing it down as we speak.
I see the state's doing a little bit of cleanup on that corner of Mission and Bluegrass, that southeast corner.
Is that in the drainage ditch there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing. It looks like drainage.
Yeah, they're
'cause
putting
growing-
like tubes underneath, so then you'll have dirt on top, so it looks like they're gonna
Yeah.
carry the water
Grading
without
the
having to have to go all the way there.
So it's not quite as much of a steep climb.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really nice to see.
Yeah, it looks a lot cleaner.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, gosh, those cattails had gotten so high last summer, so that was dangerous. So, yeah, that's great progress. That's going to be really nice to get that stuff done if we can do it. Bill,
I don't have anything.
nothing?
No.
Okay. Kim? Wait, you can use the microphone. Her microphone's
Yeah,
not working.
mine's
Bill, can you?
Off.
Actually, mine's portable. Here, use that.
Okay. Taxes are almost completed. They've all been stuffed in that. There's a small stack of mortgage informational only bills that have to be stuffed in that yet. And then it's just putting them through the postage meter and getting them in the mail. They will be, sent through on Friday, and take them to the post office so that they're in mailboxes by the 1st. So.
Thank you very much. Norm?
Okay, just tomorrow morning, there'll be a meeting out at the tribe in which they'll be announcing the recipients for the 2% semi-annual distributions. We've been invited to attend to receive a grant, which will be announced tomorrow at that meeting. So Ben and I will be there to accept and also to offer our appreciation for that. So it's open for, if you guys want to come too, certainly it'd be nice to have other representatives from the township there as well.
Thank you.
So.
Lisa?
The city meeting, they approved the signing of the contract for the Charter Township Union of Fire Protection Services and contingent on us approving it tonight. And then, let's see, they voted to establish a citizen advisory board. Those are the two.
All right. Let's see. Not much happened at the EDA. Some really good news that did come through is most of our projects that we had as far as road projects, gravel, refurbishment, and also paving, all came in way under budget. I believe the number was close to 60,000, wasn't it? $58,000. Lower.
Under budget.
Under budget.
Yeah.
Under expected.
Under budget. Yeah. So that's always good, right? It's always better than the alternative.
Yeah.
So, yeah, price of oil dropped. I'm just guessing. So anyway, so that was wonderful news. Bill puts that money back in, and you know, that basically is, I think, what we had appropriated for the sidewalk out in front of Township Hall here. So that's a bonus, right? That's back in the coffers. All right, so moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is going to be consent agenda. We do need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'd make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as is.
Support.
I had an opportunity to review all the invoices and checks everything. Checks out okay, so everything's
All right.
good.
Very good. All right, so all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Consent agenda is approved. And we're on to new business. First item in new business is going to be item A. And this is going to be to consider the approval of renewal of the fire protection agreement with the city of Mount Pleasant. Mark, would you like to read this?
Thank you. The paperwork for this agenda item begins on page 34 of your agenda packet. The township has been receiving fire protection services via a contractual relationship with the city of Mount Pleasant for, as best I can tell, decades, maybe moving on half a century now. The funding for this service is provided by a dedicated millage that the township has approved, most recently with the election earlier this month by a 70-30 margin, which I think really illustrates the support that the citizens and the importance that the citizens place in this arrangement. The current agreement was approved in January of 14. It expires at the end of this year. The recommended renewal of the agreement, it's attached in your packet. It's the result of negotiations between the township and the city. And on that point, I'd like to acknowledge City Manager Ridley, Public Safety Chief Lauria, and Fire Chief Beltnick in their efforts, and they're always, that group's always a pleasure to work with, and they were this time around as well. The agreement continues the city providing fire service protection to the township residents, as well as commercial development plan review services as it relates to the fire-related items. It also calls for the replacement or the providing a fire truck to the departmental fleet. We've done that for many years now. In fact, the fire truck that we purchased as part of their fleet is being replaced this year. They had a bid opening for that truck earlier this week. We've been putting money aside over the last several years to fund that purchase. We'll be doing that again as part of this agreement, and the next truck purchase would be in probably 15 or 20 years. The what I think is a little bit new to the agreement this year is the explicit acknowledgement that the Mount Pleasant Fire Chief is also the Union Township Fire Chief. That was implied by looking at the ordinance and the International Fire Code, but I thought it was important to make that explicit in this agreement. And coming with that is also in the agreement are certain provisions that deal with liability that I think are beneficial to both the city and the township, with this explicit acknowledgement of that we have indeed a fire chief. Also, there's some enhanced language as it relates to what's called a fire code official. The International Fire Code calls for a fire code official. It's a specific position, and that position has enforcement rights inherent with that position. That position is technically different than a fire chief, and the code requires that the governing body, such as the township, name a fire code official. And so we will be doing that as referenced in your memo at the January meeting. We'll be bringing a resolution forward where the fire chief, our fire chief, which is the Mount Pleasant Fire Chief, is then named as the fire code official. And that will allow all the enforcement prerogatives that exist with the fire code official at the city of Mount Pleasant to run through to the township via the fire chief. I hope that wasn't too confusing, but thought that was important to make sure that we, the township, could avail ourselves to the powers, if you will, that the fire chief and the fire code official have, and make sure that those are applicable to the township. The amounts of it's a 5-year agreement. The annual amounts are listed in your packet. They're a product of looking at the share of fire runs that occur in the township versus the total of the township in the city. So it's a pro rata basis of applying the expenses explicit to the plan reviews and the fire suppression services, and how those line up with our load on those calls. And then there's some increase in that, basically inflationary for the last couple years of the contract, and a little bit higher than inflationary for the first 2 years to get us on par with the method that I just described. And I guess that pretty much wraps up my remarks. The agreement has been reviewed by our attorney, and it's been signed off on by them. The administration encourages and recommends that the board approve this agreement to facilitate the continued service that's been provided very well by the city over the last any number of years, and will contribute to the continued growth of residential and commercial activities for our citizens here.
Thank you, Mark. Any remarks, questions?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the fire protection agreement with the city of Mount Pleasant.
Support.
Okay, motion and support, discussion.
Yeah, Supervisor Gunning, I just mentioned that I am employed by the city of Mount Pleasant as a firefighter for the past 26 years. And over the course of the last 10 years as a board of trustee here at Union Township, I've recused myself because I feel there's a monetary conflict of interest in taking a position on this contract.
Accepted.
Should we mention that it's a 5-year agreement in the motion?
You can.
I just wondered if we should. I mean, we don't have to, but if we,
Well, it's the only agreement before us at this time,
Right.
Yeah.
so there are a lot of details in it, but I think we're probably covered.
yeah, I didn't know if we had to.
Yeah. I do have a question. So regarding this enhanced enforcement aspect of it, would that cover issues? So would the city fire chief and any designated person that he shall make respond to issues such as the following: when on apartment patios where people are burning, I shouldn't say burning, on apartment patios where people are grilling, they have a barbecue grill with charcoal or wood, which isn't allowed on a small patio on apartments, because they're elevated and many aspects regarding that. Would we be able to avail ourselves of their professional help to enforce that incident?
I don't want to get into what exactly we'd be able to avail ourselves to.
Yeah.
The primary purpose of naming a fire chief and a fire code official is when the need arises that we have clear prerogative and authority to do enforcement. And our intent has been what I described as a higher level of enforcement, such as being able to, if the fire department is responding to a bar at night that's overcrowded, they can lock that down. They don't need to worry about, calling anybody. It's over capacity, those kinds of things. As we get into the, I'll say lower levels of enforcement, we would be able to contact the city and talk to them about those kinds of things, but I don't want to suggest that it would be offered per this contract by definition. That load of additional service is not contemplated here.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Well, this has been a good long-term agreement and arrangement, a collaborative effort between us and the city, and it's worked very well. What I like is the fact that we're sharing costs and services, and wherever you can collaborate, I think that's a wonderful thing to do. This, as you mentioned, the community is highly supportive of this as well, and I do want to thank the folks from Mount Pleasant for coordinating that with us in our services. So. Yeah, I think it's a great deal. Also, I want to say, Mark, the whole contract is very well delineated,
Yeah.
too. I was very impressed with just the way it's coordinated. Everyone knows the responsibilities, roles, duties, etc. Makes it everyone knows expectations then, so thanks.
Further discussion? All right. Let's put this to vote. This needs to be voice vote or roll call, or?
This is a roll call, isn't it?
Can be.
Can be. Let's make it a roll call.
Supervisor Gunning?
Yes.
Treasurer Rice?
Yes.
Trustee Hauk?
Yes.
Trustee Micus?
Yes?
Trustee Worley?
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes. Lannon excused or recused?
Recused.
Is that what I say the wrong word?
Is that excused? But that's okay.
Either way.
You understand.
I believe that means it will be pass.
Yes.
All right.
Great.
So, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's move us on to item B. And this is going to be to consider approval of SUP 2018-05 This is a park and sell operation at 5450 South Mission Road. Mark?
So you have an application for a special use permit. It's a park and sell operation, 5350 South Mission Road. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this item in September. The special condition use would allow for the retail sale of new used cars, trucks, boats, farm equipment, mobile homes, travel trailers, and motor homes as allowed as a special use in the B4 district. In October of 2018, the Planning Commission heard from the applicant and deliberated on the application. They are making a recommendation to the Board of Trustees that you approve this special use application with the condition that a final site plan is approved by the Planning Commission. The administration thinks that consideration ought to be given to a couple additional conditions. One, that if this turns from a park and sell operation to a dealership type of operation, which would be allowed via this special condition use, that the property then be paved. Right now it's allowed to be gravel for the park and sell. And that also that the Board of Trustees give consideration to restricting to only cars and trucks and farm equipment to be sold on this as part of this operation. That would make it consistent with a similar, although not the same, operation that's a little bit further down the street on Mission Road. Those conditions were placed on that maybe a year ago. So that's something the administration thinks that the Board of Trustees ought to give consideration to, in addition to the condition that the Planning Commission indicated at their meeting. At your desk or table here tonight was placed the general requirements that you need to consider when you're addressing a special condition use, as well as the requirements specific to this particular use. And as you know, as you've done in the past, there's 10 items that you need to consider this within, and it's our recommendation that you address each of those as you consider the item.
All right. With that, we open discussion, I guess.
Well, I've got to be honest with you, I'm not really thrilled about this. I've been by that site. I see there's already been excavating done. I see they were already in violation. They had a letter sent to them, I guess, in September that said they were in violation of grading the property before approval was given. Looks to me like it's pretty close if we look at the site plan here. It looks to me like it's pretty close to a few of the trailers and the trailer park that are adjacent to it. I'm just concerned. I mean,
I would reiterate Bill's concerns. A few things is that when the operation that is to the south of it, which was Clint's Auto Body, again, we're not comparing apples and apples exactly here, but we did put the restrictions in terms of just autos and trucks for the specific purpose that to not have that business infringe upon the residences that were right across the street from there. So Clinton was also required that with any type of, that it was basically a repair shop, he would have vehicles come in, repair them, and then be able to sell those vehicles as he was repairing them or put them on auction. So that was the arrangement we had there. I'm pleased to hear from Mark that there are going to be restrictions, because at first it sounded like everything within that B4 allowance was going to be permitted here, or permitted and allowed. And I was concerned about that part of it. Again, you have, as Bill indicated, it abuts the trailer park to the west of it. And on the other side, on the east side, you do have 2 houses there, 2 residences as well. So I went back and forth on this, and Bill and I had even spoken today regarding this. I feel that we have to offer the same protection for the people in the trailer park and for the residences as we did for the residences over at Clint's. So restricting it to just the cars and trucks, that's a possibility. But I'm also concerned about a park and sell in terms of quality control, because a park and sell means you can just put anything out there. I mean, if I have an old clunker that I just want to see if I can sell, I can put it there. I do worry about what that might do appearance-wise, and, you know, making it look like, quote, a junkyard, you know, if that stuff is sitting around. So I have concerns about that as well. And again, going back, you know, I think the same protections that we're providing for the residences should be provided for the folks in the trailer park as well. To the back side of that lot, which is on the west, there's a few little trees. If this were to go through, I would also want to see condition that there be, again, a significant screening in place there, because, you know, there's going to be increased noise, increased lighting, traffic, etc., plus the fact that these vehicles might be sitting there for a period of time. So I'm not sure if I want to just reject it all, deny it altogether. I'm not sure this is the right place for this, or with the proper restrictions or conditions, then I would be more open to the possibility of doing this. One other thing, the fact that there was already a violation, that grading was being done prior to a site plan review being submitted, and then the applicant then did cease operation in terms of the you know, in terms of the grading, but nonetheless, we're starting off already, you know, from the get-go with a violation. So those are just some things that I'm kind of struggling with in terms of my concerns with this as well.
Let me interject just one thing. If I can, I was just going to touch that. We don't have a proper motion, but before we do have a proper motion, I happen to have been at both of the planning commission meetings where I sat through both of them, where the owner wasn't there, and then the second one. So I'm kind of fairly well educated on this one. You know, there were a lot of concerns I had as I was sitting in the crowd listening, and you know, the questions of screening, the questions of depth, where this trailer park is. You know, at this point in time, is it possible to send this back to the planning commission and have those questions answered? I mean, I know that they want to see that for them, I think what I heard chatter was it was unusual for them to be approving a special use without a site plan.
Correct.
And so
that was the main issue.
We actually have the benefit. This is more than they had.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the motion should be to send it back and have these things hashed out, because I don't know, myself personally, I can't approve this as it is.
Oh, the planning commission didn't have any issues with the use. All the issues that we had were all contingent on the site plan. So, you know, with the screening and everything like that. So that's why we said with, you know, site plan approval.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's, you know,
I
what
just
we
feel like
agreed
it's
on.
not complete
Yeah.
to us, though. I don't know.
And we also don't know the number of vehicles that would be allotted. Now, that would be in part the site plan. So how many parking spaces would be provided and how many vehicles would be allotted on that. but I don't know if we're gonna have 100 out there or 25 or what. And then again, I go back to what I said earlier about quality control. There's no way when it's a park and sell, you know, the owner makes money just by me bringing the clunker there, and it may not be the most suitable and the most attractive, and people have to be looking at that. So I think we have to look at this in terms of how that infringes upon the folks living there, and you know, and if there's a way that we can, you know, have the proper conditions to allow for it, that's one thing. But if those conditions can't be totally adhered to, then I wouldn't be for the project in that regard.
Could I comment?
Yes.
The procedurally, I think the Board of Trustees can deny it. You can approve it as it's been presented by the Planning Commission. You can attach other conditions to it. Peter, I'd have to defer to you as to whether or not one of the options is sending it back to the Planning Commission. I would imagine they could, but you might need to look that up in the code. Whatever you do, though, I would discuss this. If you're going to end up taking any action, I would discuss this and make your comments within the context of the requirements for review in the code. And in order to do that, you might want to have a motion on the table and then go through those 10 things and attach your concerns to that.
Gotcha.
So that if you do end up, if there's a motion and it gets a second, you know, then you're going to end up voting on it and doing something with it.
Mhm.
You can just let it die by not, you know,
Right.
motion to get a second. But I'd be a little careful about getting too far into it without going through procedurally the way
You're
the
right.
code asks you to do that.
Thanks, Mark. That's a good point.
So then the question is what should our motion be?
Right.
I'd like to postpone it until they approve or the Planning Commission approves the
Site plan.
site plan. And
that'd
then
be
have them
a-
bring it
that'd
back
be a way
together.
to- And that's up in the next planning commission meeting then, or is it on the agenda for that?
The December Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. All right.
Because
So
I
it-
wonder if they would have approved it, if they would have seen the site plan. When you look how far back that goes, it shows it's gonna be 85 feet wide. Well, if you kind of turn that around, and I mean, it looks to me like it's gonna be, will it be 100 feet from those two trailers behind it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's pretty close.
I know they brought up questions of lighting and things like that. I don't know if they really directly discussed the, you know, because obviously there wasn't
A site,
site plan, so.
and they
But
might not have approved it. if
We do have a
it was-
motion on the table to postpone until after the planning commission has the opportunity to address the site plan.
Would we have to still decide on the special use, or if we postpone it, we're just kicking it
We're
completely
kicking it
back
down the road, I believe.
with maybe our concerns that are expressed
Yeah.
to be included in the site plan review, and then for it to come forward to us for the special use with the site plan attached and the conditions along with it as well.
Mhm.
And then we would be in a better position. Does that sound right to you?
I think you can do that just by taking.
If you want to. I just wanted to postpone it, like, until
Right.
after they bring it back.
Right, but I'm saying if we postpone it, there's a reason for it.
Excuse me, one second here,
Okay.
may I have let Mark have the floor? Go ahead.
I would suggest that you just take no action, let it die right here,
Yeah.
right now,
Okay,
and then you will have done nothing. The Planning Commission will be on their agenda for further consideration of the site plan. What you're kind of getting into, and we see this often, is the use versus how the thing's gonna look and feel, which is site plan, and it's a little different than use. But you don't have to make a motion, you don't have to take any action.
okay.
All right. And then Lisa can express our thoughts to the
Yeah.
planning commission. Okay.
That sounds good. Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so this is going to bring us to item C, and this is going to be the approval to schedule the FY 2019 budget adoption public hearing. Mark?
So prior to the adoption of the annual appropriation resolution, a public hearing is required to be held. And as part of that process, the board needs to take action to direct staff to schedule and notice that public hearing. And so what we have in your packet tonight is for a motion to be made to instruct staff to notice a public hearing to be held December 12th for the FY19 budget, and have that notice published in the Morning Sun. And we'll be able to proceed with, procedurally, with approving the budget later on that month, later on in December.
Well, I would make a motion to approve the schedule, to schedule the FY 2019 budget adoption public hearing for Wednesday, December 12th, 2018, and to notice same in the Morning Sun as required by statute.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, we take it to vote. All in favor of the motion to schedule the notice to appear in the Morning Sun on Sunday, December 2nd, 2018, and the public hearing is scheduled for December 12th, 2018. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does carry. We move on to item D in new business. And this is going to be consider the approval of the proposed Board of Trustee meeting schedule for 2019 calendar year in accordance with the Open Meetings Act.
So the calendar is on page 49 of your agenda packet. The meetings, of course, would be held the second and fourth Wednesday of each month unless noted otherwise on the calendar. If there's a change, it'd be due to a holiday or something along those lines. All of the meeting calendars or schedule is on this sheet of paper. You're only addressing the Board of Trustee meeting schedule and adopting that calendar to be in compliance with the Open Meetings Act.
And Bill, you make the card game this year.
Yeah.
Next year. I can celebrate my anniversary for the first time in 2 years, 3 years.
I'd make a motion that we approve the proposed Board of Trustee meeting schedule for the 2019 calendar year in accordance with the Open Meetings Act.
Second. Either way. He's on.
Just give it to Kim.
Yep.
You got it,
My
Kim?
left ear hears quicker than my right ear does.
We're good at that.
Yeah. All right, so all in favor of approving the Board of Trustees meeting schedule for the 2019 calendar year in accordance?
Discussion.
Oh,
Discussion.
yep, I'm sorry. Do we have some discussion yet? Anybody that?
Sure. I couldn't really find any conflicts in dates, that were
Right.
obvious. I do anticipate there's probably a good chance that the sustainability portion of the calendar, the Sustainability Committee's calendar, could fall away as we had discussion, and it may become more evident as we continue on down our agenda and look at the monitoring reports that we're gonna be discussing tonight. But, yeah, it looks appropriate.
All right, further discussion? All in favor of approving the meeting schedule for the Board of Trustees for the 2019 calendar year in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does carry. We move on to our next item on the agenda, which would be item E, and this is to consider adoption of ordinance 2018-06, as well as publishing notice of adoption in the newspaper. Mark?
Thank you. This was the subject of your first public hearing this evening. has to do with the the amendments to the land division ordinance. I don't have any other comments other than what I indicated earlier this evening, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'd make a motion to conduct a public hearing for ordinance 2018-06, following public hearing vote to adopt ordinance 2018-06, as well as publish a notice of adoption in the newspaper.
I'll support it.
We have motion and support. Discussion?
As was discussed in our previous meeting, this is an effort to keep the wheels of business at the township rolling in a timely fashion for the consumers. And it fully meets statutory requirements and looks like an improvement to our operation if we are to pass it.
Agreed.
Okay.
Going once, going twice, all right. So, we do have a motion and a second. Let's take this up for vote, seeing no more discussion, and this would be,
Roll call.
what's that? This will be roll call? A roll call vote? Okay, this is to conduct a public hearing for ordinance 2018-06. Following public hearing, vote to adopt the ordinance 2018-06, as well as publishing notice of adoption in the newspaper.
Supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Micus,
Yes.
Trustee Lannan,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes.
All right.
Just to clarify, and forgive me if I'm missing something here, did we not have a public hearing this evening?
Yeah, we did, didn't we? We had it earlier, yeah.
Okay. So
There's a
this
typo.
act, forgive me for not speaking up earlier, but,
Yeah.
so this action
You
was.
looked slightly confused a second ago, so I was wondering why.
Yeah.
That should not
Yeah, I thought that.
You should not had a question that I looked confused.
That's why it's normal look from you, so.
It was a giveaway. Don't play poker.
But in all seriousness,
Oh, yeah.
thank you for that clarification, Ben.
Yeah.
I would amend my motion
Okay.
to read, move to adopt ordinance 2018-06.
Publish. And publishing.
As well as,
Publish the
as well as publish a notice of adoption in the newspaper.
I'll agree to it.
All right, so this is, again, the motion is to conduct, excuse me, we already
I thought the
conducted.
same.
It's following the public hearing, which we conducted this evening, is to vote to adopt ordinance 2018-06, as well as publish a notice of adoption in the newspaper. And this will be a roll call vote.
Supervisor Gunning,
Yes.
Treasurer Rice,
Yes.
Trustee Hauk,
Yes.
Trustee Micus,
Yes.
Trustee Lannan,
Yes.
Trustee Worley,
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes.
Well, it's the same thing for the next one, too.
I feel like I'm a newscaster just reading the the prompter in front of me.
And everything's
Sure I
wrong.
don't do this again.
That's the same thing.
All right. Okay, so that brings us to item F. And this is to consider the adoption of ordinance 2018-08, as well as publish a notice of adoption in the newspaper.
And so again, we've already held the public hearing earlier tonight. The motion, should you choose to move on the item, would be to adopt the rezoning ordinance 2018-08 and instruct staff to publish the notice of adoption in the newspaper. Again, this has to do with a parcel on 4080 South Whiteville being rezoned, the northern portion from R2A, which is 1 and 2 family low density residential, from agriculture, and the southern portion would remain ag.
This one is right in the corner of Whiteville from Broomfield. There's a neighborhood right there at not Cornerstone, what is that, Meadowbrook. So it does fall in line with the uses on the other side, so I
Right.
guess I don't see a lot of problem with it.
Yeah, although the, we mentioned last time at the future. Oh, sorry.
I'll make a motion to adopt the rezoning ordinance 2018-08 along with the publishing notice of the adoption in the newspaper.
Support.
Okay, sorry.
Can talk.
Okay. The future land use map, according to the master plan, does have that area as zoned as a rural reserve. But because this particular property is only, 1 acre, going to be divided into 2 parcels, and it abuts what is a R2A neighborhood, so it's a perfect fit in that regard. So, and it's not leapfrogging either in terms of going from one area to the other significantly. The other thing is that actually it further restricts the use on the property as opposed to ag going to R2A. You really have, more control over that, and they want to put houses there. I think it's a good match. So I don't see, any problems with it at all. So it's good.
I thought it was kind of peculiar how a little piece of that property is on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
Did you notice that on that site plan? Yeah, a little piece of it, I wouldn't think it's much bigger than this room, is on the other side of the road. Like, it would butt up to, like, the, 5th hole
Right.
Mm-hmm.
of Riverwood.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
But I think it's going to fit. It fits well with what exists there. So I think I'm very comfortable rezoning it in this regard.
Further discussion?
Good.
Good. All right, this is gonna be a roll call vote.
Supervisor Gunning?
Should probably restate the motion.
Oh, go ahead.
And this is going to be to adopt ordinance 2018-08, as well as publish a notice of adoption in the newspaper.
Okay, Supervisor Gunning?
Yes.
Treasurer Rice?
Yes.
Trustee Hauk?
Yes.
Trustee Micus?
Yes.
Trustee Lannan?
Yes.
Trustee Worley?
Yes.
Clerk Cody, yes?
Motion carries. And we move on to item G. And this is going to be the annual review of board governance policy number 3.8, board committee principles, and policy 3.9, board committee structure. And so really the only committee we have is the sustainability committee at this point in time, correct? Now, why isn't the sidewalks and pathways committee part of this? That to me seems like a kind of a long-term committee. Is there a reason why that isn't considered the same as the sustainability?
That committee is under the direction of the planning commission as
Okay.
opposed to this board.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and the sidewalk committee that we shortly call it the sidewalk committee, was created through, I think through our ordinance, our sidewalk ordinance.
Okay.
And this sustainability committee was created by this board.
Okay. All right. Answers. I was questioning that when we were going
Yeah.
through this and the other stuff tonight.
Right.
I was like, I wondered why that was. All right, so this is a discussion item, so. Do we believe number one is the item? Are we in strict compliance with the policy as stated as far as our committee structure?
Yeah, I think as a board, we've been adhering to this. The one part where it says a committee ceases to exist as soon as the task is completed. So that's something we always keep in mind, that whenever we have a committee or a task force, that we always consider, we were talking in our last meeting, there were some questions regarding, has the mission been accomplished in terms of the sidewalk pathway? So, I think that we're certainly having those discussions, checking out to see what the goals and mission statement are, if they've been indeed, completed or not, and is there any additional tasks that we're asking for that committee to do, or at some point does that then cease to exist? So I feel that we've been following this, pretty well,
And
so.
that committee can be put into dormancy, but then
Correct.
also, when we see sustainability, we see that the move that we have towards biodegradable and renewable resources, So, you know, you see at some future when, you know, the plastic, single-use plastic bag ban, I remembered that now after you'd mentioned it. Because I had mentioned that as something that you're seeing a lot of communities doing now.
You
that-
can take plastic, by the way, you can take plastic bags. I recycle all my plastic bags.
Oh,
You
back
can
at the
take-
grocery store, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you could take them to Walmart, for example. They get this big box, so you just, you know, throw them in there and it.
Problem is that's what not what people do.
Right.
So.
Environmentalists do.
90% of all plastic water bottles end up in a landfill.
Uh,
So, you know, I mean, there is a charge for that committee, and we're not talking specifically about the sustainability, but, you know, I do think that when we look at how we've run these committees, and I think, you know, Phil's done a great job of, I think, really trying to keep that committee going and focused, because I'm sure it's been a little bit of a challenge, because you really had only one task.
Yeah, in recent years, only one task. In the previous years, though, we have done some exciting things before this board came to be members here. You know, these wind generators, the 3 here and the 2 at the Isabella Road water site. Developed with involvement of the Sustainability Committee, and you know, not to extend the meeting too long by a few more comments, I also want to say that you know, we did look at other issues that came up that were asked of us, such as drop-off recycling opportunities. You know, funding for that was pretty excessive, and the board didn't follow through with commitment on it. So those were some good achievements that the committee made, and I think this cleanup day that we do is great. You know, what a great service it provides the citizens in many aspects. Just the individual homeowner gets to get rid of stuff at no additional cost. It cleans up neighborhoods. It's great.
You know, and then we don't want to get this all into the Sustainability Committee, right? But I do think maybe in the next meeting or two, we should maybe put it on the agenda to discuss. My last words on sustainability is after hearing the report from the federal government on climate change, you know, I think that certainly a charge of maybe looking at trying to make our buildings more, we have windmills out here, you know, but it'd be nice to get us completely, maybe a little bit off the grid and create our own grid with solar and mix of wind, and maybe that's a possibility in the future, because, you know, we have to lead, right? I mean, that's our charge, is to lead, right? You know, that was disturbing hearing that. And so if there's anything that we can do, obviously, to encourage, but also show by example, then that could be fully a charge to the Sustainability Committee, I would think.
Right, and another achievement of the committee was several years ago, the same question came up that you had about, well, what's the energy use in our township buildings? And particularly when you look at all of the money that we spend on electricity, and you know where electricity comes from. It comes from, well, not so much, as much today, but a lot of it comes from coal-burning power plants. So what did our Public Works Department do? They conducted a study about the energy use of all of those motors and pumps that consume all that energy. You know, we spend over $100,000 a year just on electricity for those water and sewer plants. And so they looked at those, and you know, what are the elements of it? Before a motor begins, there's this like starter part to it. I'm flaunting my mechanical ignorance here, but what I'm getting to is that we fully looked at that. Public Works Department looked at that as a result of a suggestion from the Sustainability Committee. And I'm not saying that we've taken care of all the issues, but yeah, there were some good things done.
Well, I know we talked about solar street lights. If we could find something for them, what was it? I was just looking, I think it was last month, that all the consumers' power bills we have for all the street lights. I mean, I don't know, don't quote me on this, but I thought our consumers' power bill last month was like $26,000.
It probably didn't include the EDA.
No.
I mean, yeah.
Well, there are low energy use lights along the Pickard
Pickard.
strip of the East DDA that were installed.
But that monthly bill is pretty high though too. I mean, you know, I see it every month. So there's a lot of money there too. And then you got the Christmas lights. The Christmas lights are, I think, you know, pull close with what we're done because we've doubled the decorations. We're pushing $10,000 in electricity on that. So.
There's a couple of them out, by the way.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. I noticed last night.
Yeah, good question. I think we'll have the Sustainability Committee look at, why do you have to have 2 trees on one post?
Can't miss them that way.
I'm sorry. I think we should probably move on.
It does look good.
If I can get back to the other, to the sidewalk committee, because that's what you brought up last week, or the last meeting, regarding, you know, if the mission's been accomplished, and we were gonna, and it sounds like you had some.
You mean
more-
sustainability?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If the mission rather has been accomplished, if it has, I mean, do we put it in mothballs for a bit of time, or do you still feel that it should?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that many missions have been accomplished, but without direction from this board,
Right,
they don't have an agenda.
okay.
And I think that was the whole idea. And Mark's doing work to research the origination of it, of the committee, and get more exact about the whole structure of it and such. But it's also plain to see when we read documents that are before us that the committee, the Sustainability Committee, reacts to direction of of this board.
Yeah.
And if we're not going to give them anything, well, then it's fine to let it go on sabbatical for a while.
I think we should fully put that on a future agenda in the near future, maybe the first one in January. And, I mean, I think we should all write down ideas personally. And, you know, I mean, there's things to do, right? You can't tell me that there's, when you talk about sustainability, that a cleanup day is the only charge, right? It's just that we've been a little lax in this level of giving direction. And if that's how it works, then that's what we need to do. I mean,
Yeah,
if we
but
fully
let's
can't
be-
come up with anything that's viable, then fabulous, but.
Yeah, that's true. But we need to also keep in mind that, you know, there's a price for it too, and I'm all for doing a lot more, but I'm not the only vote on this board, and, you know, a couple $100,000 for a recycling drop-off site might be the right, it could be the right thing to do, but are we gonna, you know, support that
Right.
with our board vote when it comes to budget times? Those are issues we have to address too as a board.
So I guess my comments on the issue before us, are we in compliance with this board governance policy 3.8? You know, which basically states if the board needs some assistance to identify alternatives to look at, to answer questions they have, how to move forward in areas, then yeah, you would establish a ad hoc committee, a committee of some sorts. But I think at this point we're slightly out of compliance because we're trying to hang on to something that's accomplished its task. If the board moves forward and has some ideas that is beyond what we can work out on our own or utilize the manager and staff to figure out, then that may be time to solicit folks with interest or expertise in that area to bring us information for consideration. So I think we live by the spirit of the law. We try to limit our committees. We try not to let them answer the questions that we're charged to answer as far as making decisions on things. But when a committee's appointed per our policy and it fulfills its function, then it should immediately be cease to exist. And when we get to the point where we've identified we need some help or direction or interest in appointing another committee, we would do that at that time. So,
How about
I
putting it
obviously
on
we're
next
in
meeting's
compliance.
agenda? How about we put this on our next meeting agenda?
what's this?
Sustainability Committee.
Yeah, just the fulfillment of what we've discussed today. Should we, you know, take action to suspend it or whatever word we want to use? Rather than waiting till January, as you suggested, why not do it now?
I mean, the question is whether you want to suspend it or whether it just very simply that board has just been waiting for direction all this time. I mean, to me, sustainability is ongoing, so.
It
I just
is,
think it's
but-
been a lack of direction.
I agree, Ben, that it's ongoing, and, you know, it's for the board to drive it. And if we need some help, then we would create a committee in that arena.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of the discussion, so I would go for that personally. I mean, we wanna put this on the fast track
Yeah.
a little bit and.
Let's just sleep next week
Yeah.
or next meeting and see
Exactly.
what we come up with.
So do we wanna come back with suggestions for them?
Either that,
Yeah.
or we may decide that, you know, they've served their role and it's no longer necessary at this moment. But I really like the idea of, you know, not getting, you know, somehow at least having it lie dormant and be available if something comes up in the future. Because I can't imagine that there won't be some issues that will come up with the environment. I mean, it's inevitable.
Yeah, it's ongoing. Well, I mean, it'd be nice to have maybe an email from management on what the original charge of that committee is when it was established.
We're looking into that.
Yeah, are you getting that? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
And if we have to, you know, change the charge, I mean, that would be our, just part too, you know. And Phil's been a pretty stringent member of that board for a long time in the committee, and so if he wants to continue, then maybe, you know, he kind of feels like he wants to move on and maybe have Bill take over for him.
I'd support that. No, but, you know, seriously, I think that as we, what I'm hearing from a couple of board members is the fact that, you know, we're kind of hesitant to let go of sustainability, but we're not really going to do that as an organization should the Sustainability Committee not have any direction from this board, because sustainability issues have kind of become commonplace. For example, I mentioned, you know, energy use review of our infrastructure. And going forward, what I see is this township, as we're developing into different levels of management that Mark's described, those management level positions in our organization are going to have the time and energy to look at sustainability issues. Now, they won't be in the sustainability as we're talking about it here, but energy conservation, pollution control devices are a couple that I can think of. And Also, we saw sustainability issues come up through our master plan. You know, there's discussion about that, and how building and construction have sustainability issues, and so I'm kind of happy to have seen what's occurred over the past many years that this sustainability committee's been in the township, but just the general improvement of interest in sustainability issues or environmental issues that we're all seeing. So you know it's not going to die, because we're all going to be focused on and hearing the news about climate change, which is really a big focus of our environmental attention, I think, going forward.
All right. So, basically, we want to
Next meeting.
put this in the next meeting, and then I think fully.
Do or die.
We have ideas, though. We have thoughts about you know, maybe creating some ideas or tasks or that you know, and it's up to, obviously there's people in the committee that you know, been there for a while and been on that committee for a while, so it's up to them whether they want to continue. But you know, but maybe with a little fresh energy, then it re-energizes and invigorates. And
I did send a communication out to the other 3 members about the situation and what would some of their feedback be, and I haven't heard back from them yet.
okay. Well, any further discussion on this particular item, item G? We want to move on to item H. All right, let's move up to item H. And this is going to be to consider the approval of FY 2018 budget amendment number 4 for the general fund, sewer fund, and water fund. Mark, talk quick.
Well, I will. I won't go into all the detail. This is the 4th budget amendment of the year. The Uniform Budget Act requires, at a minimum, that when it's known that revenues and/or expenses are going to deviate materially from the existing budget, that the budgets get amended. And so we've been doing that throughout the year. This is the last one of fiscal year 2018. There is a list of items that revenue and expenditures, the 3 funds that were being asked to be considered for amendment are the general fund, the sewer fund, and the water fund. And just to go straight to the bottom line of each of those, the net impact of the budget amendment for the general fund is to increase the projected year-end fund balance by $138,886 in the general fund. There's a lot of detail, pluses and minuses that go with that. On the sewer fund, the resulting impact of the budget amendment for the sewer fund is to decrease the projected year-end fund balance by $283,000 compared to the existing amended budget. And I will note that the biggest driver of that is a reduction in revenue of $429,000 that was budgeted in FY18 for the receipt of a SAW grant. And we were awarded the SAW grant. We went into the hopper years ago. We were awarded it, and to get reimbursed, we need to submit invoices and canceled checks, and we're in the process of compiling that information, but it won't be available for this fiscal year. So we'll be seeing that as a budget amendment to FY19, increasing those revenues. The water fund, the bottom line, the net impact of that budget amendment is to decrease projected year-end fund balance by a little under $2,000. It's a couple $1 million fund, so A lot of this is truing, what I would consider truing up the actual year-end activities against the amended budget for financial statement purposes. If there are any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll make a motion to approve the FY 2018 budget amendment number 4 for the general fund, sewer fund, and water fund.
You have a motion, do you have a second?
I'll support your motion, Lisa.
Discussion is open.
Looks pretty much straightforward.
Yep. Yep. All right, so this will be to approve the 2018 budget amendment number 4 for the general fund, sewer fund, and water fund. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion does carry. And we move on to item 11. And this is going to be extended public comment. This is restricted to 5 minutes regarding any issue. And again, this will be for comments only. The board will not be able to respond. So there will be no discourse. It will be strictly comment. Seeing no one here for public comment, we close public comment. We move on to item 12, which would be manager's comments. Mark.
Thank you. Just a few. The water main break that you might have read about in the paper yesterday has been fixed. There's still a boil water advisory. We've run the first test as it was normal. Normal protocols to when we're reacting to a water main break. It was on a busy road, but it's fully under control. The construction, we had the pre-construction meeting last week for the Isabella water administration remodeling, and then construction has just started this week, so that's underway. Just looking ahead, the next couple board meetings, we'll have a public hearing for the budget, 2019 budget at the December 12th meeting, with adoption scheduled for the week later, December 19th. Remember, the calendar's a little different in December for the board meetings due to the holidays. And then on December 19th, we look at adopting the FY19 budget. I hope to have the recommendation for the compensation classification contract before the board at that meeting, as well as introduction for first reading and scheduling a public hearing if the Board of Trustees cares to move forward with an ordinance to at least temporarily opt out of recreational marijuana. And that item can be discussed on the 19th. Then lastly, I was asked to report out at the last meeting regarding the Nottawa Township sewage needs. And so there was a meeting last week, I think early last week, with the township supervisor, Nottawa Township supervisor, and 2 of their engineering staff. And we had a good discussion. Where they are right now is they have been talking with the city of Mount Pleasant about Mount Pleasant treating their sewage, and there'll be a infrastructure within Nottawa Township, and more specifically, I think Beale City, some infrastructure in terms of collection and distribution of sewage, and then the distribution continuing on a main sewer pipe from the township to city township environment. And it's at that point that it needs to be treated. For whatever reason, the Nottawa Township engineers took a look at our existing rate structure and did some math on their own and determined that based on that math that the pricing, the cost would be considerably higher than what was being, I guess, discussed with the city. And not sure why they took that approach, but they did. And what I offered them was, or I asked them for an opportunity to submit a proposal based on their, what I called scope of service, what their needs may be. So they're in the process of presenting that information to us, and we will be able to respond with a proposal of our own. It'll primarily cover two areas: treatment and some administrative functions, the billing that goes on at what they're probably going to be doing is a special assessment level. And so when we've begun to receive some of that information back from them, I look at this as I would consider the township a wholesale customer. We don't have any existing wholesale customers. All our customers are retail, whether they're commercial in nature or residential in nature. This would be what's typically referred to as a wholesale customer. It's a different unit of government. They're doing their own collection and distribution down to a treatment center. We do not have a wholesale customer class in our ordinance right now. Therefore, we don't have a wholesale customer rate existing in our ordinance right now. So when we get that information, and I think it might have come yet this, I think it came maybe today, but we'll be looking at that with our rate consultant and seeing about putting together a proposal which would, at the end of the day, boil down to a rate that we would charge the wholesale customer for the treatment by volume of their sewage. So that's where that is right now.
So they'd be basically paying for the lift station, the piping, and run that up to our existing system, and then we would take it over at that point in time? Or would we have involvement as far as any other stuff?
In its simplest form, we would become involved at the point that sewage that is not ours entered into our system, and there'd be a meter placed there, and we'd measure the volume and then charge based on the volume of the treatment. And it'll get a little bit, you know, there's costs associated with the ongoing treatment, chemicals, electricity, pumps run and all that. And then there's typically also added to those charges the draw on the infrastructure. All the customers contribute to the fixed cost, paying for the fixed cost, paying for the depreciation of those fixed costs. So that would be a component as well. And then the other component is more administrative. Somebody needs somebody, whether it's their own staff or contracted out or what have you, to bill their customers. And then those, they got to generate the bills, send out the bills, receive payments. How's all that going to work? So there's that whole office end of it. And then there is a whole piece of their own infrastructure now. That they have this collection and distribution network that becomes their responsibility. And how are they going to, once it's built, how are they going to manage that? How are they going to upkeep, how are they going to do the repairs, how are they going to do the replacement? All that will be their responsibility. Now, how they choose to execute that responsibility, they'll have several options. They could contract, they could hire their own staff to do it. There are private companies that do this kind of work for municipalities and manage their water and sewer systems. They could hire or look for a contractual relationship with another public sector entity, such as a city or a township, to provide that maintenance and the upkeep, and what do you do when the pump goes out, and so that's how big it could get. But in its simplest form right now is their proposal request is going to focus on the office component, and from that meter point, what would be the charge to the township.
What percentage, what is our, as far as our capacity on our system as we speak, where are we at as far as our capacity?
We're at about, I want to say around 50% capacity, don't quote me. I want to say the capacity is a little over 2 million gallons per day, and we're using a little over 1 million of that right now. You know, there is existing capacity. The current projections of what would be coming into the system, which include Beale City, which as I understand it, is just a name. It's really not a city. It's not incorporated. And then a couple other areas in the vicinity that around one of the lakes, but
Coldwater.
not both of them. Coldwater Lake.
And I think are the other two. Yeah.
So at this point, based on that footprint, the way I translate it is it would amount to a large apartment complex, maybe 600 people or something like that. So a large apartment complex. But nonetheless, it's still a wholesale customer. It's not a retail. It's not an apartment. That just gives you some relative size. It's another unit of government, and as you could imagine, looking down the road, you have a couple units of government, whatever they might be described as, a few miles away from here. Maybe other people join, or you got a mile of pipe coming from there to here, and there's other areas that may join, and it can grow. So the capacity issue is important.
Exactly.
Our system is sized currently for our own projected growth over the next 20 years, and having said that, if we had a large apartment complex built into Township, we'd have the capacity for them, and that's about what this would amount to today.
So a consideration then is to, if we were to go along with, if they wanted to work with us on this, is then what we're bringing in, how quickly that would bring us up to our capacity, our full. And then does that begin to stifle some of our potential growth? I mean, you said that right now is an apartment complex, but then going further down, will that begin to put a moratorium on our growth because we've reached our capacity? And then the other issue would be that once we reach capacity, it means having to then add $1 zillion again to enhance or to make it bigger. So there are expenses. I mean, I guess to me it seems like bottom line is it worth it? I mean, you have to look at both ends of this, both in terms of serving a neighboring community, which I would certainly support in a collaborative effort. Yet on the other hand, how quickly does that put us up to capacity, and at what cost it would be for us once we've reached that capacity to then, move on.
There's a public safety component involved, obviously, too, though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's a major contributor to the E. coli levels in Chippewa River.
Right.
I know Deerfield Township has some issues in some of their older neighborhoods also from older septic systems, which if you're running a pipe from Nottawa, you're going through Deerfield. So, I think eventually this kind of sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, it almost sounds like you're really kind of at the cusp of creating a sewer authority along with
They're
the
not
possibility
going
of water
for
failure.
Deerfield.
They're actually doing it to fix the water. Or
Right.
That's why it's being
That's
done.
why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And then, but it's only
Right.
.08 our usage is what they're expecting.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's a public safety component
Oh, I don't
here that if
disagree. I mean, that's the reason it's
If we
being,
certainly, if we
that's
allow
why
them
it's
to
being
hook up, then
created.
that's a part of the mix.
Yeah, but they have, right now, we're not the only option. They also have Mount Pleasant that they're considering. But the main concern is from their end is because of the pollution coming down with E. coli going down the river. So that does have to be addressed. And that has to be addressed in numerous ways, not just public safety, but even in terms of the tribe, those are considered sacred waters. So, you know, there's a whole lot of components here that go into play.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that when we're making a decision of this magnitude, to make sure that how it might be affecting our potential usage and capacity, and would that begin to stifle some of our ability to allow continued growth here? Because, you know, again, we're trying to promote, managed growth within our community. So there's different, you know, there's a lot to look at here, you know. But certainly, I think any collaborative effort you make with a neighboring community, I'm 100% behind that, you know.
And we bring that information to the board at the appropriate time. The bottom line message that I left Nottawa Township with was, whatever you thought it may cost you for the township to treat the sewage, I wouldn't put too much weight into it because it didn't come from us. And I asked them for an opportunity to provide a proposal, and they welcomed that. And I also told them that we are very interested and open to working with any neighboring community. The river, whatever the cause and all that is, the river is very important, and we want to do what we can if we can help them and help the river, and things like I mean, it would be a long-term agreement. They would want guarantees of capacity and access, and I think it does, you know, in a very small way, you know, it can be used to begin a dialogue of, you know, the last thing we want is a full, I would think, the community, the area, a third sewage treatment,
Right.
full-on operation just down the road. And we already got two on top of each other.
Mark, did Nottawa Township give us a deadline as to when they would need the proposal from us?
They did not, but you know, there's been articles in the paper, and there's been other discussion. What MDEQ needs out of Nottawa Township is essentially what is their basic plan, and their basic plan is they're going to collect sewage, and they're going to create a collection and distribution mechanism, and they're going to have somebody else treat it. That's what they need to be able to land on. I'm oversimplifying it, but by early December, they don't need to know who they're going to be partnering with by December 1.
Oh, so the letter of intent, or this memorandum of understanding, or whatever they're working on with the city of Mount Pleasant isn't vital to them isn't necessary for them to have in December?
I don't know. I don't want to say that, but we're able to, we don't have a December 1 deadline to give them a proposal. They have an indication
Okay.
from the city via the resolution that the city is willing to engage in conversation with them about this. I don't know that they needed necessarily the resolution, but I don't know what their side is. But
Okay. So the door's still open?
the door's open.
Okay.
We're going to submit a proposal to them, and
Right now, their plans are to go down Beale City Road to Mission and bring it in from the north. That's what their plans are.
When do you think you could get that to them?
well, they just gave us, I think today, the information that we said we needed.
Oh, they gave the
to them.
specifications today?
Mhm.
See, if they come in from the north, like they're talking about, then virtually, you know, the city's over here, we're over here. So not much distance for them to go from either place once they get up Mission.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be mostly what's the unit cost to treat a gallon of sewage.
Sure. Well, that sounds good, as long as the door's not closed.
The door's not closed.
Great, thanks.
And that's all the comments I have.
All right. We are on to item 13, final board member comment. Let's see, I think I started with Tim last couple times. Norm,
I have none tonight.
Lisa. Kim,
Just
you
wanted
need Mike.
Oh, yeah, right. Just wanted to say that I was exceptionally thankful for our new folding machine. It took something that usually took 4 or 5 days of, stuffing and, somewhere around there. And it's cut that way back. So, that's something that I'm thankful for. And that, also, I had a quick question. Do we know, have we heard any updates yet on the Crawford, the talk of, sidewalks on Crawford yet? We were talking about that for a while, and I didn't know if there was any update or anything.
That was
A while ago.
our 2% request
Correct.
to the tribe, the
Right.
connector between Deerfield and Denison.
Yeah.
So tomorrow will be a surprise.
Right.
Because
It's like Christmas.
I don't know which present we're getting, but we're getting one of our 3 maybe, or 2 of our 3, so.
Okay. I just didn't know if we knew which one, so, okay.
Yeah, I just wondered, last Tuesday, a week ago, I guess 2 weeks ago yesterday, I had my septic tank cleaned out, and the Mount Pleasant Septic, they're a business here in Union Township. He knows I'm on this board, and he said, we got talking about Beale City bringing theirs in, or Nottawa Township. Well, he was asking if we would be open to discussion of having the septic companies dump in our facility. He said right now the city charges them, and he thinks that what they're paying the city is excessive, and he said he'd rather dump in the township. He told me how much it was to dump in the city, and from what he was gonna dump in the city just last Tuesday was $180. Well, he wondered if we could do better, and he said that his company and other companies would rather dump into the township system. They think that it's a lot more convenient to get in and out of there than they do in the city system. So I just wondered if we could be open to discussions, talking with them too. Right now, he said they're paying the city 10 cents a gallon, and he said that if they could get it to 7 cents a gallon, 8 cents a gallon, that they'd be willing to do that. And it's not just them. I mean, I don't know how many there are. We would be interested in talking with them. He said in the past, he's called here and he's basically been told, no, we're not interested. And basically, that was the end of the discussion. So maybe we could look into that in the future too.
We may be able to. We're not currently set up to accept it.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we're not able to accept
Right. Well, we
septic
need a dump
haulers right
station
now.
is what we need.
And that question came up a little bit in the conversations with Beale City as well, or with Nottawa Township. The short answer is currently we're not set up to accept it. And yes, it's a transfer station. And we could look at it if the board wanted us to. There's, it's just not I have no idea what all's involved in it, but the biggest thing is, we're not, when you're allowing septic haulers to come into your system, you have some risk as to what's in the tank. And so we have, that's the big thing you gotta figure out is how you monitor what's in the tank. And that's all part of the setup to be able to handle that business line.
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
Bill?
I have nothing else.
Tim,
That's good.
I think
Tim?
we're to you.
Yeah, we passed a contract with the city for fire services tonight. I didn't really have a chance to talk on it, but I was curious about item number 10 on that contract. Mark, if you could give me any insight on that, I understand it, at least, you know, in theory. Here's how it reads for everyone. If the city decides to implement false alarm fees, first responder fees, or other such fees for service during the term of the agreement, the township will also consider implementation of such fees payable to the city. So, as I read that, there's some thoughts going on in the city, obviously, about how they may structure some fee structures in the future. And it would be for us to consider is what it's saying here. You know, some people, and getting things defined, that would be something we'd be talking about. You know, what constitutes a false alarm? You know, you certainly don't want people to not report if there's a need and find out too late that, well, I thought it was gonna cost me, so I didn't report the situation and it exacerbated into something else. So that's just something I can talk to Mark or anybody about for a little more clarification. And then the other item under scope of service to property in the township. And you know, I certainly want to be very clear as to if there's any exceptions at all to, you know, are there any properties that would not be serviced as the first go-to fire department? We've had some
Yeah,
conversations
you mentioned
along the
that
lines
before, about the tribal
I would just like to have
homes.
good clarification if there are any things that we as a board should be aware of as far as who's in charge, since we now will be having a township fire chief. That should be very clear.
The latter, if I may, your latter point, I think, would require, necessitate, and the fire chief was in here a year or two ago and talked to that issue a little bit. I was pretty new, so I didn't understand it a lot, but I think the best thing would be to have him come in and talk about that, because it gets into mutual aid and some of those other things, and there are some, you know, probably technical requirements about, or things related to tribes, and I mean we deal with it with building officials. There's property owned by tribal members that aren't on the reservation, but they are still under the jurisdiction of the tribal building officials. So it's pretty nuanced, and I'm not the one to be able to speak clearly to it. Your first point, the reason that came into the agreement, and it's new, is the city is considering charging for false alarms, and that's not uncommon. They currently don't do it. Then they asked if they did it, would we consider also allowing, and it'd be require an ordinance on our part, a fee for false alarms. And I said, yeah, we'd consider it. And so that's the wording in there. And it would be an ordinance requirement, and it'd have to come through the board. But I didn't see any harm in saying that we'd consider it. False alarms can, and I don't know what the volumes are at the city, but they can become quite onerous to a fire department. Quite onerous. And I've seen and I've implemented fees for false alarms, and they're laddered. They start off at pretty cheap, but there's a charge for them, and then they can get pretty expensive, and the businesses don't like it, as you well imagine. But at the same time, they're just letting their fire alarm system, remain unfunctional, and we have an obligation, the fire department, to go out and service that false alarm. So it's a means to try to get the businesses to have good sound systems. That's the theory behind it. And so we just said we'd consider the issue if they adopted something that doesn't commit us to anything.
Yeah, okay. Right. What kind of struck me was looking at their monitoring report they sent to us under false alarms and false calls. For instance, there's bomb scare, no bomb. I mean, that's going to be rare, probably, but bomb threats do come. And trying to identify how would you price that out, because you're getting multi-jurisdictional folks involved. So just clarification and discussion on what that really means certainly would take place amongst the board as that moves forward.
And it's something that you have probably better knowledge than we do because of all your years of involvement in the fire department too. So I think that's something that we could kind of look at to you possibly to bring up some of your ideas.
Yeah, I just want to make sure the board is truly clear on what this contract entails, and if there's any areas that might draw concern.
I thought it was good to have it pointed out, Tim and Mark, that false alarms don't always originate from an individual picking up the phone and calling 911 or calling the fire department. It's electronic signals that come from systems in commercial facilities, for example. And I've had that experience go on with where I work in the Lansing area, that our system sends out at times false alarms, and we've had the first warning, and then we've had to pay the fee. And it wasn't always the system itself. Sometimes it's other factors that influenced the alarm, and then responding fast enough to stop the electrical signal or the message going out to the police department or fire department. So, there's a lot of, my point being, it's not always about a human picking up a phone and saying, help me, help me. It's more of a system concern.
Well, the first.
So it's kind of likely, so it's justified in a sense.
Yeah, right. But then also in that first responders out there, medical response is the largest percentage of what actually takes place in fire service these days.
Okay, thanks.
So that would take serious consideration.
Thank you, Tim.
Sure.
I just had two things, and just to plant seeds. I got a lot of phone calls in the last couple of weeks on Crawford Road, and whether or not if there's anything that is going to be done, if there's anything that is, on the pipeline possibly on Crawford. I drive on Crawford every morning. Boy, there's a lot of traffic on that road, and it's narrow, and there's no shoulders, and there's deep ditches, and there's big trees. Half of them are dead ashes. And, from a public safety standpoint, it needs to be on the docket. So I think maybe if it starts with us discussing it and then trying to get some idea, maybe there's the safety grants that the road commission, and I'm sure that's on their agenda, but there's a lot of other things on their agenda too. So, you know, the squeaky wheel per se maybe moves a little bit ahead of the pack. So I'd like to see us in the near future maybe discuss that and see if maybe, you know, what avenues that we have, whether it's, you know, addressing it with the road commission, seeing where it's at as far as a time frame is concerned. I know that we've got the connector that we're, you know, hopefully gonna be able to build between Deerfield and Denison and complete in front of Tennyson Stadium and put some lighting in, and that's nice. But it'd be nice, I think, for our residents and the people that drive on that road to address it at some point in time, right? And so I think it should be something that we should look into.
If I can just chime in on that quick, Ben, is that I agree with you, and the thing is it's not only hazardous during the day, but at night in particular. When I drive home now, I mean, I'll do 35 miles an hour on that road because you can't see, and all of a sudden, you know, a pedestrian just pops up on you, and you can understand then how that young man was unfortunately fatally killed there. So it's the logistics of everything there. It's really tight. The drainage ditches on both sides. I mean, structurally, it's a task to say the least.
And
but
it's multi-jurisdictional,
Yeah,
which makes it
exactly.
even
Yeah,
more
3.
difficult,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
players in that game,
Yep.
from the university to
Yeah.
the city to the township,
Yeah.
right? Road
Yeah.
commission, state of Michigan.
Yep.
You know, I mean, but eventually we have to address it,
Mhm.
right? So that was just number one.
But
Number-
hasn't it been addressed, Ben?
What's that?
Yeah.
We have addressed it.
We have addressed it, but I think that again, I think that it's something that we need to maybe push a little bit. Maybe give it a little bit of a loving nudge is all. And you know, I don't know, you know, it all starts with obviously the road commission and seeing if maybe there's possible safety grants and whether or not there's, you know, something from them that they're continually, you know, sending in request-wise to help maybe look at grant monies involved in that project. You know, I don't know that. You know, I mean, those are questions maybe we should ask.
Well, the idea of the connector going from Deerfield in was to divert some of that, you know, pedestrian traffic, but it isn't gonna take it all. There's still gonna be a significant number of students out on that road, particularly. You know, I see people biking, they're walking, they're running, they're jogging on the side, and it's tight quarters there. And like I said, at night, it's particularly hazardous. So I don't know what the answer is for that because of the situation with the way it's built, but it would be nice if something could be considered. So.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't know where it's at. Maybe that's something that you know, in a discussion, maybe we could find out. Is that something that they're continually working on, or do we need to nudge it a little bit? Because I think the community would be very welcoming of doing something on that road.
And that's why I kind of brought it up earlier, was because, you know, Lisa and I both live right there, you know, on opposite sides of the road. But, I mean, even the pathway they're talking about doing to connect Denison, that still does not help the people on the other side of the road that walk, you know, on the other side. I don't know how many times we've seen people right there that it just,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And I mean, there's lights right there from the fields, and it's like, is there something we can do to get those to stay on? I know there's CMU lights for the fields, but I mean, even having those lit up at night, it would take away some of that, you know, some of the dark space.
Yeah. And you also get the students, I mean, from the West Point apartments,
Yeah.
there's a significant number of students there.
Yep.
And then you have the soccer fields, so the kids are going over there as well. You know, you have the cabin at the end, and the kids would then go home from there to walk up to, say, Deerfield. So you're still gonna get a fair amount of significant pedestrian traffic. And that was one of the concerns I did also hear when I was campaigning, particularly over in your neck of the woods. It was mentioned several times, people asking, is there any way that there can be some type of sidewalk or whatever, you know, on there, widening the road or shoulder or whatever. So that has come up. But Phil, as you said, we've brought this up and we didn't come to any resolve, particularly. Because we decided that's what the whole idea with the connector thing was all about, that was going to be the best alternative. But maybe there's still some other things we can look into.
But I think we're looking maybe a little short-sighted from the standpoint, it's not just the pedestrian traffic that we want to be concerned with, it's the vehicular.
Yeah.
In the wintertime, when that road gets a little bit of ice and snow on it, man,
Yeah.
there's
close.
no bailout on that road. You're
Yeah.
either gonna be in a 10-foot ditch or into a tree.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it'd be something that, again, I don't know where it's at with the road commission. I don't know if they're continually pursuing safety grants on that project. It would be really nice to maybe have an idea of what exactly they're pursuing, or if they are. That was number one. Number two, with Mr. Falsetta last meeting and his wish to have his property rezoned, that whole corridor, I think, on the master plan, I would hope that the planning commission, I would like to encourage the planning commission, since that is a living document, is that particular corridor be looked into as to its classification in the master plan. Because with that being a large intersection, wide lanes, and what has always been known as is the ring road, is it's going to be a trucking route. And I would like to see, hopefully, that area is addressed, so the residents that there, number one, have the ability at some point after it's built, because we know it's gonna get built next year. You know, the funding is there, so it's gonna be a done deal. That is going to be 3 lanes and a large intersection. And so I would like to see that it's easier for residents that are there to be able to look at their property and be able to position it in a manner that they can, you know, with Mr. Falsetta, 49 years on that piece of property, you know, I mean, he's gonna wanna eventually, you know, be able to, you know, downsize or whatever, but he's gotta be able to sell it.
But we did deliberate on this issue at our last meeting.
Yeah.
And as we say, that once the board votes on an issue, then the consensus of all of us, even with a dissenting vote, we're then all in agreement with that. And so we had even talked about kicking it back, and the consensus of the board was to not do that, to wait until, not to anticipate what might be, to see what actually is once it comes. So we don't know for sure what exactly that's gonna entail. So I think one thing, Ben, is that we as a board did deliberate on that. And when there's a deliberation, even though there's a dissenting vote, it is our board responsibility that we support the board's decision. So I think that you're kind of overstepping right now in what you're requesting, especially when we've deliberated on this. You asked to kick it back the last time. We said, no, this is the way it is right now. And you're pushing it again. So I think that you're not going along with the board policy, which is that we all have an obligation, whether we agree with it or not, to then support the ruling of the board.
I fully support the vote of the board. What I'm saying is that I would like to see the planning commission continue to look at that area, is what I was saying.
They did with the master plan. They also did with the future land use.
Right.
And the ink is hardly dried on the master plan, and we're doing something in anticipation of. So that was the argument last week. I don't want to, reiterate this whole thing, but that was the argument, that rather than doing this, prematurely or in anticipation of, let's see what happens. So, and then the planning commission, and that's not for us to decide, that's what the planning commission decide, if that comes before them again.
Certainly.
So.
Yep.
Just wanted to reiterate that.
Can I make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Certainly.
Do you have any other things, Ben?
Anybody second it?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.